In especially that record Babylon for Gaga, I also used this sample of a Canadian loon bird. My name is Burns, and this is a list of dance records that are most influential to my work. Dance music is it's a form of electronic music. It's usually made primarily with computers, I guess, and its purpose is, I think, mainly to uplift people. Dance music was radio music in the UK. You couldn't really escape it. So that one was Another Chance by Roger Sanchez. It's like mid-2000s, I think. So that was like my teen years. I was like 15 or something when that came out. The song became a hit in the UK. It became mainstream, but originally it came up through the clubs, like a lot of electronic music does. I think because it's based around a sample, that gives it a feel that is hard to kind of explain to. It's from a Toto record. I Won't Hold You Back, I think, by Toto.
If I had another chance tonight.
The opening of the song is the chords and him singing that line, and it's got this like very emotional feel to it. So when you combine that with like an uplifting dance record, it's like the key to a great a great house record or a great dance song. It's affected a lot of my own music, especially Rain on Me. I would reference this record for the texture and the feeling of it. It has this like, it's called a phaser, which is like an effect that producers use that makes things kind of out of phase, so you get this kind of almost like underwater sound to elements. They layered that on top of the sample, which increases the energy of it all, I guess, gives it like a very textural feel to it, which I can play you like the piano part if you want to hear that. That's an M1 piano, so it's like a classic house piano sound. Like that's a guitar pedal, like a wah effect, so automatically plays with the filter. And then you can add, so that's like a phaser. You hear that, it's kind of like out of phasey kind of, it doesn't really sound like a piano anymore. It gives it a feel, it's like a human feel to it somehow. That is definitely, yeah, very Daft Punk kind of feeling, you know, that kind of early 2000s era of Daft Punk. Like they use a lot of phasers on stuff. That was Gabrielle by an artist called Roy Davis Jr. First of all, to me, it's the best UK garage record of all time. And that's, UK garage is like a genre of music that was kind of very popular in the UK, late 90s, like early 2000s. Alongside the house scene, there was a UK garage scene, which is more like a sped up, swung, breakbeat rhythm to it. The bass line, especially in dance music, I guess, is driving the song usually. So the drums and the bass are very focal points. That song in particular, like the bass line is the key. There's four main elements, and it's the sub bass, how it moves, the vocal and the organ, and then the trumpets. There's like a legendary break, which is a drum beat loop. But it's this one drum loop that got sampled throughout dance music. It's a sped up loop that creates that kind of swung break beat. It's like it's kind of like this skippy thing. It makes you want to move though. It's like you can't really pinpoint it. I've done a lot of records that are reminiscent of the feel of garage records before. I put out a song myself called Angel. Also, I did a record with A$AP Rocky called Energy. It has a saxophone line in it, but the idea for using a sax as like a second hook came from that record. So it's been a big influence on me, even probably when I didn't even realize. But I don't think you can ever come close to it again. The whole thing is just like a masterpiece. That's Music Sounds Better With You by Stardust. I think most dance music fans would put it in like the top 10 dance songs of all time or something. From a feeling standpoint, texture, production, mixing, everything really. It's like the GOAT record of French house music. Stardust is Thomas Bangalter from Daft Punk and Alan Braxe, who's another French producer. And they only ever made one record together, and it samples a Shaka Khan record called Fate. And it's like a 1-bar loop from the beginning of the song. So you just get the guitar riff part, and then you get the sort of organ chord. So it's just a dun, 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 ding, ding. And that's just looped through the whole record. And what they did that was really interesting and gave it a whole new feel, like, you know, like I was saying about sampling, they added a bass line on top of it that kind of moves outside of the chords, so you kind of get this feeling shift whenever the bass line changes. It kind of like shifts down, I think, like a 3 notes or something like that. So it's like a dun 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 dun. Even though the song is based around a 1-bar loop, it feels like it's not just 1 bar of a loop. It feels like it's a full progression thing. I worked with a guy called Fred Falk a long time ago, who used to work with Alan Braxe as well. And he said that they made that record with an EMU sampler. It's called the SP1200. And it's like a box that you could program chunks of music in, and you could loop them, change the pitch and record it. You could only have short loops basically and then piece them together. So they had the Shaka Khan record, they put it in there, looped that bar of music, and the sampler gives it that kind of, it's like a bit crushed sound. And bit crush is an effect you can add to a sound that makes it sound like it's like a lower bit rate, and it becomes like this sort of fizzy sound on top. I don't know, it's like this texture. That record, along with the Roger Sanchez one, were sort of big reference points for what I was trying to do with Rain on Me. I think you can hear like the similarities in the texture of the piano and just the overall like pumping sort of French sound. This one has just been a huge influence on me generally for everything that I do. That's Pacific State by 808 State. There's about 20 different versions of that song. They named them all differently as well. There's one called Pacific 707, one called Pacific 202. This is very much like a acid house anthem, although it is quite down-tempo and kind of chilled out. And there was this big rise of a genre called acid house, and that was late 80s, early 90s. It's got like a haunting kind of sound to it for some reason. It's like washed out, loads of pads and weird drum patterns, and the bass line is like all over the place doing crazy stuff. That song is so unique as well because of how the bass line moves too. It's like on the 16th notes and it's all over the place. It's like playing its own melody underneath the song, but it drives the record. So at the start of that song, you can hear it. It's like a sample of a loon bird, which is like a bird that lives on a lake. It's kind of weird. It's like, what is this? Like, I think when that record came out, people probably described it as like the bird song or something, like it's got a bird sound in it that comes from like a keyboard, like a sampler that you used to be able to get in the late 80s. In especially that record Babylon for Gaga, I also used this sample of a Canadian loon bird. It was almost like my homage. I wanted to reference that era and that, you know, that kind of period of music. And this song symbolizes that genre. That's Future Sound of London with Papua New Guinea. Again, it's in the same world as the last record. They're very similar in the feeling and the mood, and they're quite eerie feeling again, like, and it's pure height of like acid house. It's influenced me just in I mean, obviously it's another break as well. It's like the amen break, kind of the drum loop in there. So it comes from an old soul record, a record called Amen Brother. That is a group called the Winstons. That drum loop became the staple for dance music. It's a live bass, which is kind of, I guess, unique for an acid house record, because not many people were using live instruments. So it feels very human. It's like a dun 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 dun. And it just complements the chords, and you get the kind of, there's like that high, sort of almost like ravey sequence sound. You're like floating or something. It's really emotional, and I think it's because of the vocal over the top of the kind of jarring music underneath it. It's a unique feeling. I'm kind of in the box primarily, which means I don't use a lot of hardware. I use like a guitar now and again, and I use a couple of different keyboards, but really everything's in this computer. And I do strive at the same time to have a human feel to it too, because a lot of electronic music, especially now, I think has lost that organicness. So when you combine it though, it takes on a whole new form, and it becomes like a unique sort of feel to it. Yeah, that's Window Licker by Aphex Twin. It's quite influenced by the other records, but it's definitely a different sound to what we listened to before. It's total experimentation. It still like sounds better than a lot of records now. I'm talking about the mix of the, not necessarily musically or anything like that, but just the way that the drums and the bass and everything is produced. It's just wild. So mixing is like a whole different skill set to just being a producer. You always think about each element having its own sort of position in the song. For example, like a bass sound, like a sub bass would be very low down in the frequency range. So you don't need any of the high end of the audio to be present. So you would get rid of it all. So the only thing that's audible is the low end frequencies, because that's where the bass sits in the song. And then for instance, like a hi-hat, very high top end gives brightness, so you would always carve that out in that area. And it's like carving something like a sculpture, you know. Vocal is usually sitting in the mid to high range, so, you know, everything on the low end can come away unless it's like a real bass, you know, low end vocal. It's like just making sure that elements sit in their own space in the song and they're clear. And Aphex Twin, like, people use it as like a reference a lot of the time. On my first ever tour, I supported Calvin Harris on the road. The sound engineer would always play that record through the system to check that everything sounded right. I also read he like took the vocal samples from like a porn video or something. Like pitched them all down. Like you can hear like it's like people screaming and stuff. I don't know if that's true. It might just be rumors, but he did. It's just so weird, but done in such a cool way. So that's Fly Life by Basement Jaxx. They sample a song that they actually produced for somebody else. They made a record for like a singer-songwriter and used it in this record. So they almost like remixed themselves. You can definitely hear the disco influences in there. There's brass in there again. I must like stuff with brass in, I guess, because most of them have got either like a trumpet or a saxophone in it. And then you've got this kind of vocal sample over the top that doesn't really have any words. It's just like a kind of a sound, but it gives it the human feeling again. When I started out, I was only doing songs for my own kind of pleasure, and nothing was for the radio or anything like that. So I would always gravitate towards sampling things. Now it's obviously more difficult. If I'm making a record for somebody, I can't just go and take a Shaka Khan sample and throw it in there because, you know, someone gets sued. So with Rain on Me, the mindset was to almost like sample myself. So like I would make a part of the production, then I would bounce that off as a single piece of music and then bring it back into the song and mess with it even more and chop it up. You make something and then kind of recycle it again. That's a record called You're Not Alone by Olive. And that record is one of those where the vocal is quite like sort of sad and emotional, and then everything else underneath it is like lifting you up. So you kind of get this contrast of feeling that makes for like a really uplifting experience. The chords move in a weird timing, it's always coming off the beat. And actually Olive is the keyboardist from Simply Red, which is so weird. It's so far away from it, but also you can kind of hear like those influences in Simply Red, like the kind of dance music chord progressions and piano. And a guy from Nightmares on Wax, with like a kind of trip hop act from the UK, and they just made this one record and that was it. So it's a weird anomaly that happened. That's Liquid Sweet Harmony. It's an iconic piano riff. It's the epitome of dance music, that piano riff. It just is dance music, really. It's like a C.C. Rogers sample, I think, from a record called Someday, which is like a gospel house song. They lifted it from that and put it with a piece of the vocal as well. But then over the top of the sort of pads and the break, it just becomes this whole new monster of a song. It's an era in the UK where music was just bringing everyone together, I guess. People were like raving, and it didn't matter where you were from or what you did or how much money you made or whatever. You were just there for the music. Dance music is every genre because it's built off sampling records and using drums from here, using keys from this gospel song, using a vocal from this, R&B record or anything like that. It's just a collage.